Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for second reading the bill shortly entitled Public Finance Management Amendments. Mr. Speaker, during the preparation of the budget, we found that there were certain sections of the Public Finance Management Bill that did not align to the Constitution of Saint Lucia. The Constitution of Saint Lucia, under section 79(2), speaks to, section 79 speaks to 30 days after the fiscal year, 40 days after the fiscal year, to present sections under 79(1), Mr. Speaker. It reads, the Minister for the time being responsible for finance shall cause to be prepared and laid before the House before or not later than 30 days after the commencement of each financial year estimates of the revenue expenditure of St. Lucia for that financial year. That was the Constitution of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, in the Public Finance Management Bill, it contravened the Constitution, and it read as follows. And on the section 32(1), for the purpose of section 79(1) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, cap 101, the Minister shall no less than 30 days before the end of each financial year lay estimates before Parliament. Mr. Speaker, so these two sections contravened each other. In fact, Mr. Speaker, over the last 2 years, we found it very difficult to follow that prescription. Last year, the Minister of Finance came to Parliament to ask for an extension of time, ostensibly for the same reasons: COVID, staff shortages, staff not being able to, after somebody is tested for COVID, they have to take 7 days or 10 days off. So, and in spite of the hard work of the staff of the Ministry of Finance, it was not possible to follow that rule. And furthermore, the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, allowed 30 days after the end of the financial year. So it was decided, Mr. Speaker, to amend some of the sections of this bill, ostensibly amending section 32(1) to allow the Minister of Finance to lay the estimates of revenue expenditure before the House of Assembly no later than 30 days after the commencement of each financial year, as opposed to no later than 30 days before the end of each financial year. That is to align itself with the Constitution. But that's what the Constitution says on the 79(1), Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we also asked in this House to approve the amendment of section 32(3) of the Act, to allow the House of Assembly to approve the appropriation bill no later than 30 days after laying of the estimates before the House of Assembly, as opposed to no later than the last day of each financial year. Again, aligning with the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, by virtue of clause 3 of the bill, section 32(5) of the Act is amended so that the House of Assembly approve the appropriation bill no later than 30 days after laying of the estimate before the House of Assembly, where an extension of time is approved by the House of Assembly under section 32(4) of the Act, Mr. Speaker. So again, prescribes 30 days after, not more than 30 days after, even if there are provisions in the Constitution where you can spend up to 4 months after the end of the financial year, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, amending section 32(6) of the Act is amended by clause 3 of the bill to remove the condition that an emergency under section 17 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia should exist before the Minister of Finance can authorize a provisional warrant. And clause 3, Mr. Speaker, of the bill also amends section 32(6) of the Act to correct the reference being made to the responsible minister with the minister, which means the minister is the Minister for Finance, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, in clause 4 of the bill, section 40 of the Act, provisional warrant is amended similar to section 32(6) of the Act by removing the reference to an emergency under section 17 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the Act is amended under Clause 5 of the bill to change the references made throughout the Act to Parliament with the House of Assembly. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is that money bills only have to come to the House of Assembly and not necessarily to the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, these amendments will bring the bill in line with the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, and it actually came into force because the staff of the Ministry of Finance, in spite of the work that they had been doing, they found it was very impossible. It was impossible to follow the dictates of the PFM, even if they tried by their best efforts. So the recommendation came to extend it, and since there was no violence being done to the Constitution of Saint Lucia, that is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. There was no violence being done to the Constitution, so we believe, and we ask honourable members to support the amendment of the Act, as I said, particularly Section 32.
Minister for Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to applaud members for their contributions. Mr. Speaker, the member for Castro South left me with nothing to say. But I wanted to make the point, Mr. Speaker, that what we are seeking to do this afternoon is very, very simple, Mr. Speaker. Trying to align in subsidiary law to the main law. Very, very simple. And the member for Vifford South said it clearly, Mr. Speaker. Oh, Mr. Speaker, I just want briefly to talk about that law and what is put on paper doesn't matter if the practice is not followed. If the practice is not followed, in spite of what you have on paper, does not matter, Mr. Speaker. And in the governance of the last government, regardless of the Public Finance Management Act, what they did in terms of the management of this country, if they did not have an act, I don't know what else they would have done. Mr. Speaker, the member for Microsoft quoted from the IMF, and today the IMF has become a source of reference, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the IMF recommended to the government not to reduce VAT. They did it. The IMF recommended to the government not to borrow for the airport, but do it for PPP. They did it. The IMF advised the government to procure by tendering, not by direct award. They did it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say today in this honorable house that our government has committed itself to fiscal responsibility and to macroeconomic stability. We have committed ourselves to that, Mr. Speaker, and all our actions for the last 6 months will show that we have committed ourselves to that, Mr. Speaker. What we've said is that people cannot be left to suffer whilst you look at ratios whilst people are suffering. We will not allow people to suffer just to maintain ratios, Mr. Speaker. We will strike a balance between the ratios and to allow a better life for the people of Saint Lucia, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we just want to say that when we must put things in context, Mr. Speaker, the member from Microsoft speaks about Grenada, and he says Grenada is the best practice because Grenada has laws, Mr. Speaker. Of course, but again, you must take it in context. How did Grenada get to where it got? Grenada got to where it got before COVID for a rigid structural adjustment program. A rigid structural adjustment program that not only increased taxes, but created an environment where, because of the medicine that they took, the Grenadian economy happened to stabilize itself, Mr. Speaker. But what the Grenada government inherited when it got into power was nothing like what this government inherited when they got into power in 2016. And you can make the comparisons, Mr. Speaker. When this government got into power in 2016, they found an economy that was on the cusp of beginning to improve. They found an economy with projects, an airport, 2 hospitals, the Grozile Highway, an administrative center in Viewfort, funding for 15 feeder roads, funding for the Millennium Highway, Mr. Speaker. They found these projects ready to go. They abandoned all of them, Mr. Speaker. Every one of them was abandoned, and that caused the country to either stop or go back. So when COVID hit, St. Lucia was found in a situation where it suffered the most from COVID, a 26% decrease in GDP because of COVID, the 6th largest decline in the world. You know why? Because the government had stopped the projects that would have created some level of economic viability and economic growth and went on a frolic of their own. That is the situation. That's a different solution, Grenada. So Grenada could sustain it because Grenada did not go on this lavishness and this recklessness, but instead they took to a strict level of structural reform and macroeconomic changes. Barbados, Mr. Speaker. When the Barbados government came into power, they found a debt to GDP ratio of over 150%. In St. Lucia, when they got into power in 2016, they found a debt to GDP ratio of about 65%. What they should have done, Mr. Speaker, is to build on what they found. And no Public Finance Management Act cannot help you when you have these bad practices, Mr. Speaker. No act can help you, Mr. Speaker. Why are we in that state? Why are we in that state, Mr. Speaker? And the member for Castro South was right. We're in that state, Mr. Speaker, because in spite of the Public Finance Management Act, this government found a hospital being built. They paid for technical audits. They refused to make the technical audit public. You know why? Because the technical audit said that these buildings could continue to be used as a hospital with some slight modification. That's what the audit said. So they refused to put it in public. But then the member for Mico South speaks about a letter that said it would take $100 million to complete it. But Mr. Speaker, that letter is a letter on our program. Because they have spent, and they've been itching us, they've been pushing us. Say what you find. As they say in Patois, point du vent à point du vent point. They have been itching us in the St. Jude, Mr. Speaker. If they had spent that $100 million to complete the St. Jude, and that's not true, but if they had spent it, Mr. Speaker, the money that they have spent on the car park they have built, and the money that they intend to spend based on a contract that we saw. And when the time comes, we'll make it a document of the House for everybody to see, Mr. Speaker. We will put it in the public domain because we are tired of people hiding behind flashing mirrors. We are tired of that, Mr. Speaker. You will find that they needed $70 million plus what they've spent already on the car park, which is more than $50 million to complete the bottom floor of St. Jude Hospital without one piece of equipment. So it's better they had spent $100 million on the St. Jude buildings. They would have saved. But Mr. Speaker, no Public Finance Management Act can help you when you behave in that kind of way, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, roads. There was a poll done in this country, and we did it too, which said that if you build roads, you'll win elections. If you build roads, you'll win elections. So this government, after they had borrowed from the Taiwanese over $200 million to build roads, saying that they would pay it off the fuel surcharge, they went on a frolic again and gave direct awards for $186 million worth of roads at 5%. You know what that's costing us, Mr. Speaker? You know what this costs me as Minister of Finance on behalf of the taxpayers of Saint Lucia? $46 million in payments. $46 million in this fiscal year. Whereas if the government had just followed what the Kuwaitis had left for us, we would have got $110 million worth of loans with a 5-year grace period to pay back in 20 years. Listen, let me talk about accountability because of an act. And you know, when we quote the IMF and the World Bank, I'm not against these institutions, but these institutions must begin to speak the truth of what they find and why the ratios are where they are today. Because that $46 million that I have to find to pay, Mr. Speaker, if this government had just went through the process and looked for infrastructural loans, as most governments are doing, look for loans for infrastructure. These are structured loans that you pay over 20 years. But to do them, you have to have an internal rate of return. You have to look at the economic feasibility of these roads. But in their mind, it was not the economic feasibility, it was the political probability. Not the economic feasibility. Not whether the roads had an IRR that justified them being built. Not the process that we went through when we were doing the Kuwaiti roads, and which we are going to start back. The senior minister has agreed that we are going to begin to look at a proper feasibility for the reconstruction of roads in Saint Lucia. Roads that have an economic rate of return, roads that will bring some level of economic viability to the country. And in the Kuwaiti package, Mr. Speaker, they will feed the roads into the agricultural areas, into the areas of production in this country, not roads to nowhere for political benefit, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we are here today. So no public finance act can help us. These things are just things that you have because some people say you must do it. The proof of the pudding, Mr. Speaker, is how you use the resources of the country, and if you have the diligence not to be swayed by political situations only. And, Mr. Speaker, if you have the sustenance and the fortitude to say people, you must do what is right. So even though you are my friend, Mr. Speaker, I will say to you, I cannot give you $20 million to build half a mile of road. I can't tell you that, Mr. Speaker. And many times, Mr. Speaker, many times, people come to us. People say that the Labour Party government doesn't see about its own. You know why they say that, Mr. Speaker? Because we demand that things are done right, Mr. Speaker. So, we are building the custody suites. The custody suites, when you hear about COVID, and I want to get back because I'm relating that, Mr. Speaker, to the act. The custody suites. You heard about we were weak, we did not arrest people for wearing masks, and they gave the minister, and I wanted to seek a little bit to see how this government has handled the cabinet, how we've handled this COVID crisis in a very professional and a systematic way, Mr. Speaker. So what have we done? We are going to build but you know what? We have instructed the minister to tender. So in spite of the need for the custody suites, there's going to be a tender process, and an eligible contractor will be given the job to the custody suites, even though we need it, Mr. Speaker, and even though we intend to do it by design finance contract. Mr. Speaker, I am all for maintaining the law. My father was a policeman. I brought up in law. I brought up understanding right and wrong. I brought up understanding that I must do certain things in a certain way. That's why I have no problems with discipline. That's why I could wait. I could wait my turn. That's why I could wait. That's why I could understand that to lead you must follow. That's why I understand them, Mr. Speaker. I understand these things. That's what I am of. That's what I am of. I understand following, I understand discipline, I understand principle, Mr. Speaker. So, when we find ourselves in these situations and people want you to believe that what you have to do is a show. So you must pretend that you are following, that we are breaking the law. We are not breaking any law. We are aligning the law to the Constitution. So to appear that we are creating a cardinal sin and we are villains because we are saying that the Constitution must be aligned to the subsidiary law which the Financial Management Act, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we do not need a lesson in transparency and a lesson in accountability, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have not taken any decisions without consulting with the technocrats. If it's health, we consult with the health officials, Mr. Speaker. Even in law and order, we do not interfere with the runnings of the police force, much to our detriment. I say it loud, Mr. Speaker, because certain things that we could have done, we have not done because our hands have been tied by the strictures of the system. But we follow, we are patient, because we understand the value of following the Constitution and following the law, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we can quote from all books and all documents that make us sound nice, Mr. Speaker. But the proof of the eating is in the pudding, Mr. Speaker. Is how you run the government. How when you have the opportunity to follow best practice, you do not follow best practice, Mr. Speaker. And if best practice is followed, this economy of Saint Lucia would never be in the mess that it is today. I would have never had inherited what I hate to use that word. I would have never have found what I found on the 27th of July if best practice was followed and if this government had done what it had to do at the time, Mr. Speaker. Several situations where we wasted money. Several situations where we had to make a point, to make us cry, to make us pay. Decisions were taken only with the political motive. How you will make the Labour Party look bad. So you stop meaningful projects, Mr. Speaker. No one can tell me up to today, no one could tell me any reasonable reason why Hiwano International Airport was stopped. There is no one who can tell me why, Mr. Speaker. There is no rational, no economic reason when the IMF that you quote said that we should follow the PVP model. No one can tell me, Mr. Speaker. And when the story, and the Mayor for Castries South began it, when the story of Hiwano International Airport is told, you will see that no public finance management act can help you. Can help us. That was no help to us. If that was help to us, we would not have been in the mess we're in with the Hiwano International Airport.
You say this Glasgow.
What? Glasgow. So, Mr. Speaker, I obey the law. We are all for fiscal rules, we are all for stability. We are going to follow the law. We're going to follow the processes. But what will define our government is in the practice of governance. That is what's going to define us. How we behave, how we ensure that we follow the rules, Mr. Speaker. That is what is going to define us. And it's only 6 months, Mr. Speaker. But I say to you, it's 6 months since this government, we have taken over the administration of this country, Mr. Speaker. And no one can say that during these 6 months, we did not try or we did not follow best practice, Mr. Speaker. Best practice from even the Deputy Speaker. Best practice, simple things, very simple things. We caused the youngest member in the Parliament. And I wasn't the most popular person for that. I know that. But I stood by the principle that if for 5 years we had spoken about not having a Deputy Speaker, we could not come into government and not appoint a Deputy Speaker. And I'm sure when the time comes, the history books will reflect that I followed the law and the constitution of the country, and I was not convenient, Mr. Speaker. And that is how I intend to run the government of Saint Lucia. I intend to run it not for convenience, but with principle. I intend to run it, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the majority of people of this country, and not for the benefit of a few. I intend to run it where everyone will have an opportunity to aspire to become something better in this country. That's how I intend to run it, Mr. Speaker. I intend to use the meager resources of this country to improve people's lives, even though it means sometimes stretching the ratios. Even though it means that, Mr. Speaker, even though it means having to deal with the international financial institutions that will put some pressure on us, Mr. Speaker. We will not be reckless. We will not disobey. We will see if we can stay within the fiscal barometers that are placed for us. But I will never make the people suffer because for the benefit of a few, Mr. Speaker. This is why we are going to finish St. Jude Hospital for the people of this country. We are going to finish St. Jude Hospital, Mr. Speaker. And we are going to ensure that what is happening at Hiwanora International Airport is brought to some level of fiscal discipline and fiscal responsibility. It can't continue. So in spite of the quotations, Mr. Speaker, in our practice, Mr. Speaker, we will ensure that our practices are right, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what is the rationale? And the Minister of Education, he can tell you, we were buying computers. I instructed that you have to go to tender. Even though the computers would arrive a few weeks late, we will explain to the people of the country, but we will not do like Fortuna picks. Direct award. And Mr. Speaker, our information tells us that officials of the Ministry of Education advised the government that that was not the right way to go. And today, these computers or these e-books are a burden for the people of Saint Lucia instead of a help, Mr. Speaker. And we have, after we've bought them, we now have to pay licenses for them every year after we've bought the e-books, Mr. Speaker. It's costing us millions of dollars every year. What can that do for you with that kind of practice? What can laws in a book do for you with that kind of practice? Up to today, we have to pay millions of dollars for licenses where you could get laptops or you could get tablets and you would get the same thing done at a cheaper rate. But we're going to solve it because the tenders have been chosen, and then we are going to get 10,000 laptops or tablets for the children of the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you speak about, when we talk about good governance, and because we are aligning a law to to the Constitution, we're committing a cardinal sin, and all kind of quotations that come from everywhere, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, good governance doesn't mean that what you say or what you quote. Good governance means how you deliver and what you deliver and the way in which you deliver it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. We have found ourselves in a situation where we've inherited an economy that is in 26% decline. COVID affected the entire world. So I'll never blame any government for COVID. COVID affected the entire world, Mr. Speaker. But the money we borrowed was not money given to Saint Lucia because Saint Lucia was special, or because Saint Lucia had that act, or Saint Lucia did not intend. The money was given to the entire world. The whole world borrowed money, was given at concessionary rates because of COVID. The whole world, everybody. Barbados, St. Vincent, everybody was given money. We weren't so special, that's why we got money. But what did we do with the money? Out of the $229 million that we borrowed, Mr. Speaker, all but 10% of it had to go into recurrent expenditure, because when COVID struck, our economy was in a state of confusion and in a state of decline. We had no reserves to meet our current expenditure, so we had to use all that money to pay salaries and to keep the government coffers running. Where other countries who had reserves could have used part of their reserves to pay salaries, etc. That is why we are in the state that we are today. And you talk about management, and you talk about quoting from the IMF and saying, and before I end, Mr. Speaker, because when I get in this topic, I can speak for the whole night. Because it's hurtful, Mr. Speaker. But when I go to my constituency and I see the guys there complaining, boss man, nothing here running, and they put pressure on me, boss, you are the prime minister, and you can't give me nothing, Mr. Speaker. And I see how much money we owe, how much the CDP owes for contracts. How much the CDP owes for contracts, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, you see that whole CDP? That's a whole different story, Mr. Speaker. That deserves a study on its own. When you look at the amount of money that went from projects called Synergy, absolutely no accountability. No accountability. And today, we have a debt of $200 and something thousand to pay people who worked with Synergy. We owe $4 million plus for CDB contracts. A lot of them went in the month of July, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and the Minister for Equity has to account to the cabinet. Because in 1 month, in 10 days, $650,000 were spent at the SSDF in one constituency.
That's accountability and transparency.
That, and no book I help you.
And that book was
and that book was working in already. You had that book, and we hadn't changed the laws yet. $650,000 in 10 days in one constituency, and these 10 days were between the 10th of July and the 25th of July.
And they still lost it.
Mr. Speaker, no laws can help you, Mr. Speaker. When you send an agreement with a contractor for $75 million on the 15th of July. On the 15th of July, a contract is sent to be signed for $75 million on the 15th of July. But the civil servant, in his wisdom, he say that one a little too hot. So he pass it. If that civil servant didn't act with such competence, we would have on our hands a contract signed for $75 million for completion of the bottom floor of St. Jude. How is it possible for you to complete the bottom floor of the hospital and leave the top floor people working on it? I mean, does that make any sense? I mean, is it logical, even though you have that book? Is it logical to spend over $150 million on the bottom floor of the hospital, and you say that you will move it with the bottom floor whereas you will work on the top floor? And all of us say, if you're renovating your home you're renovating, sometimes you have to leave to renovate your house. But you could build a whole house. Right? So, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the people of St. Lucia that they must have some patience with this government, Mr. Speaker. Because we have not gone around and cried and blamed people. We have gone around purposefully doing what we have to do for the benefit of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker. And we have not gone on any witch hunt. Because if you go on a witch hunt, we'll have so many witches we're going to hunt. We could go on a witch hunt. We could come and show documents and although they hid some of it. We could, if you were a vindictive government, Mr. Speaker, if you were vindictive, if you're a government that was going after people, look at how we've treated the civil service, Mr. Speaker. Look at how we treated, and look at the United Workers' Party record for the first 6 months of office, and look at what they did in the civil service, what they did in the foreign embassies. You said the difference between them and us. That's the difference, Mr. Speaker. Between them, look at it. Keep your memory short. Look at what you did in your first 6 months in terms of how you treated civil servants, how you treated ambassadors, what you did in the police force in the first 6 months of your rule, and look at what we did in our first 6 months. And you see the difference, Mr. Speaker. So in spite of the fact that when we try to change laws to align the Constitution, you accuse us of all kinds of things, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, Mr. Speaker. That's what it is. Look at the civil service. Ask the permanent secretaries. Ask them. Ask them how ministers treat them with respect. Look at it. Ask the permanent secretaries the respect that are given by ministers. Ask them. Ask them how we ensure that good governance is practiced. Look around. Look around, you see, Mr. Speaker. Look around. But that comes at a cost. At a cost that some of our supporters are annoyed at us. They believe that we are going too slow. They believe that we're not doing what we're supposed to do, because they know that they suffered immensely when we were not in government, Mr. Speaker. They know they suffered. They suffered, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank members for supporting this bill, and I want to say to them, Mr. Speaker, that the motive of this government, Mr. Speaker, you speak about transparency and accountability. Look at that. One direct award, Mr. Speaker, one of them, $2.093 million for one company, supervision services for land stabilization and road rehabilitation at Bagatelle and Forestier. Bagatelle and Forestier. Mr. Speaker, the Bagatelle is part of my constituency. The member from Microsoft had some fond memories up there. The last time you went there, you had some fun memories. Bagatelle is part of my constituency. I do not recall where the road rehabilitation was done at Bagatelle. I know that at the top of Bagatelle, there was a landslide from 2016. No, after the last hurricane between 20 and 21. Right, Thomas. And I know that was repaired. But it cost $389,000 for the supervision works. Supervision. $389,000 for supervision, Mr. Speaker. Huh? No, of course. Of course, Mr. Successful will supervise. Well said, members yourself. Supervision of works, island-wide, drainage systems. Listen to that connotation. Supervision of works, island-wide. Okay? Drainage systems in Microsoft and then Resolve. So that means they supervise works island-wide. But there were drainage systems in Microsoft and then Resolve, $800,000. I talk about accountability because of the law. Supervision services for the construction of the Bexar community. Mr. Speaker, how much does that community center cost? $904,000 supervision services for the Bexar Community Center. $904,000, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so that means 10%. So that means that, how much it cost? $10 million for a community center. $10 million for a community center. We are going to finish the Bassett Reserve Community Center, Mr. Speaker, this year. And we are not going to spend nothing near $10 million, Mr. Speaker. But for the supervision, Mr. Speaker, I said a while ago that we are going, but this thing is really. And the more you see this, Mr. Speaker, the more it really hurts you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, listen to that. Listen to that. $2.09 million for supervision services for one contractor. I'm not in the business of calling people's names, so I won't call it. $2.09 million for supervision, land at road at Bagatelle and Forestier. Now, let's go straight to Forestier. In the same Forestier, Mr. Speaker, you have another direct award, Mr. Speaker, of $2.8 million for the same Forestier road. So you have $2.8 million for the construction in Forestier, Mr. Speaker, and then you have another $389 million spent in Forestier alone, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I will end very shortly because sometimes when I see, Mr. Speaker, that officials of the Ministry of Finance and the Treasury have to hustle to find money to pay paupers. They have to hustle to find money to transfer to the public assistance vote, Mr. Speaker. And you can pay $2 million for supervision. And we cannot find sometimes we cannot find in the government's coffers $50,000. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that no law can help you when you have a government that operates in that manner, Mr. Speaker. No law can help you, Mr. Speaker. And I join the members that say we have to ensure that these laws they do not cause us to have our hands tied behind our back While if you're unscrupulous government, you can do a lot of things whilst you have your hands tied behind your back if you want to follow the right procedure, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we are going to, hopefully, we get support for this slight amendment to align the laws to the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you know, we're supposed to have a debate one day and put on the table one day, Mr. Speaker. And I hope the Constituency Development Program Mr. Speaker, I don't want to tell you who signed that one. Because if I tell you who signed that one, you're going to find yourself, you're going to get vexed with me. Contract for design drawings for the construction of the Roblo and PI community centers and the Marcus Garvey Hall. No, I want to build a community center for you, you know. I'm building it. No. $648,000, Mr. Speaker. Summary of deliveries. On submission of narrative report, 15% of the fees. That means when you talk the project, 50% of the fees, $97,000. On submission of draft drawings, $162,000. On submission of architectural designs, $162,000. BOQs and specifications, $162,000. On DCA approval and final acceptance, $64,000. Total $648,500, Mr. Speaker. For the Roblo and PI community centers, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to mention who was given the contract. Direct award. Not the contract to build. The contract for design of drawings. $648,000 to draw the buildings. Contract for design drawings for the construction of the Robert and PI community centers and the Marcus Garvey Hall. $648,000. At some point.
Marcus Garvey Hall?
Yes, in Choiseul. Mr. Speaker, we are building a community center in Bois Saint-Joseph, Mr. Speaker. And I can assure you there are going to be no fees of that nature because we are going to use a government infrastructure to do it. So it's going to be supervised by the Ministry of Planning and the Ministry of Infrastructure. So we're not going to pay any fees, Mr. Speaker. That's $648,000, Mr. Speaker. And up to now, the member of the Dennis for sure he has no community center. You have a community center? Wait for me. Okay. $648,000, Mr. Speaker. And I will not tell you who the person is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is more, you know. There is more. And I'm saying that, Mr. Speaker, to make you to now. The same, well, the direct award, yes. $648,000. Direct purchase for detailed designs for the Marcus Garvey Hall, Roblo, and PI Community Center. $648,000.
And direct award.
And direct award. So you didn't even give somebody else an opportunity to tender, Mr. Speaker.
Public Finance Management Act in place. Exactly.
Mr. Speaker, there are more, you know. There's more, Mr. Speaker. Another direct award, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, direct award for award of contract for security services. $1.1 million. Security services at the St. Jude Hospital, $1.1 million, Mr. Speaker. Direct award. I have never heard security services ever given by direct award. $1.1 million. And there is something that's consistent from the Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation. Consistency. All of them, Mr. Speaker. Victorious direct award from the Department of... Mr. Speaker, undertake infrastructural work at Victoria Hospital, $3.3 million. Direct award under the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, Mr. Speaker. Again, Ministry of Economic Development, I'm not going to mention the contractor name. $3.3 million, Mr. Speaker. I want to ask anybody who is living in Saint Lucia, tell me where, when, and how. In May 2020, was $3.3 million worth of work done at the hospital.
They paid the
For $3 million.
I don't, but they paid it.
$3.3 million, Mr. Speaker, on May the 1st, 2020, Mr. Speaker. $3.3 million.
That was a mistake.
And another one again, Mr. Speaker. Direct award. I'm not going to mention anybody's name again. $1 million for the provision of technical assistance to the project management unit. Technical assistance to the project management unit for configuration, supervision, and transitioning services for St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project.
No, explain that.
Again, Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation. And that's on the 10th of May, 2021. 10th of May. Elections on the 26th of July. 10th of 21, Mr. Speaker. Direct award. $1 million for the provision of technical assistance to the project management unit for configuration, supervision, and transitioning services. So look at the dichotomy. In May, you are talking about configuration and transition services now. In May, but you haven't completed the building yet, you know. You have no building to transition to, because in July you've just signed another direct award, another contract for $70 million, but already in May you're paying for configuration and transitioning services to move across somewhere that you have started. So, Mr. Speaker, so you understand why, Mr. Speaker, there is need to slander and blaspheme us every day on the radio? You see why? Because these things must not be told, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, back to... Okay, Mr. Speaker, contract for supervision of works at St. Jude Hospital reconstruction site, $4.4 million.
Say that again. Supervision of what?
So, again, Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation. May 2021. May 2021, you know. Mr. Speaker, I'm laughing, not because I think it's a joke, you know, but because if I don't laugh, I'll cry. On the basis of recommendation from the Permanent Secretary, Department of Economic Development, Transport, Civil Aviation, dated 10th May 2021, and the powers conferred upon me as Minister of Finance, not me, as Minister of Finance, pursuant to Part 3, Section 91C of the Program of Segregation, I hereby grant approval for contract by direct award. I'm not going to mention the name. In the amount of Eastern Caribbean, $4,478,625, VAT exclusive, for the supervision of works on the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction site. And the contract that you have is for design finance bill. Yes. So if you have a design finance bill contract, you're supposed to be supervised by your Ministry of Infrastructure, because the contractor has all his designs and everything else. But you have to pay somebody $4 million for things, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, listen to another one, Mr. Speaker. $1 million as part payment on full designs, and contract administration on the construction of the police headquarters and court facility under a proposed bolt arrangement. Listen to that carefully. Not only that, but a bolt arrangement means that the contractor comes in with everything. Build, own, lease, and transfer. $1 million. Part pay, and clearly, part payment, Mr. Speaker. There's more again. Listen now again. Again, Mr. Speaker, you know, you have $4 million left for that one. And then in October, you have $405,000. Again, design consulting services for St. Jude Hospital reconstruction site. The same person again. Mr. Speaker, all of them consistent with one ministry.
And one minister.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, we're still into St. Jude's, you know. Mr. Speaker, you know, this St. Jude Hospital thing. Look. Request for direct purchase again to St. Jude. 17th May 2021. $25,687,893.
That's in addition to the same.
In addition to the
That 25 was for what?
for architectural works. I'm not doing this. I can make it a document house, Mr. Speaker. I can make, if you want, you can make a document house, Mr. Speaker, but it's just that I'm not in the business of calling people's names inside there. $25,687,893 for architectural works for the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project, Mr. Speaker. And there is a document for $70 million for the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. And you talk about, because we're trying to align a law to the Constitution, you talk about accountability, and we are breaking the cardinal virtues of the Ten Commandments because we are trying to align we're trying to align a hospital subsidiary law to the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my hands, again, St. Jude Hospital again, St. Jude Hospital again, St. Jude again, Mr. Speaker. We have finished yet, you know. St. Jude again. Look at you remember the story of the Denry Polyclinic? Remember that? The Denry Polyclinic. Remember that? $719,000 professional fees for assessment and redesign of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing joints for dairy for irrigation. $719,000, 11th of March 2020. $709,000, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so when you people get accused Mr. Speaker, St. Jude again. St. Jude again, Mr. Speaker. $10,999,985.56 for the construction of the structural frame of the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. So you pay separate for the frame. $10,999,985.56. St. Jude Hospital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, St. Jude Hospital, and you see, I'm not mentioning the names of the people involved. Because I always say to people, if a businessman is allowed to fool the government, he must go ahead and fool the government. I have a problem with that. If a government allows a businessman to fool them, let him go ahead and fool him. But the question is whether the government did not allow the businessman to fool him indirectly for direct benefits later. That's the question. St. Jude Hospital again, Mr. Speaker. St. Jude Hospital again. December 2020, $776,000 for technical support and design advisory services. Technical support and design advisory service, $776,000. Mr. Speaker, listen to even more of it, Mr. Speaker. Direct award for implementations of projects in the Soufrière constituency. Now that one is a funny one, eh? That one is very funny.
What kind of fun?
I hereby grant approval for contracts by Director Board for implementation of, I see now. I see the person now. For implementation of projects in the Soufrière constituency. Implementation of projects in the Soufrière constituency. 134,282 for the supply of materials for construction of Old Trafford complex. Listen to me. The first line says for the implementation of projects, but lower along the line it says for construction of materials for construction of Old Trafford complex, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that was February 2020. During COVID. Now, Mr. Speaker, listen to the one that this government is going to continue. But you know, faith is a wicked thing, Mr. Speaker. We came here and we debated a loan from the Caribbean Development Bank for the replacement of the LED lights. That loan was cancelled. They cancelled it. The CDB up to today, I was speaking with CDB, and they are regretting that we cancelled that loan, and they are inviting us to start over again. But it's too late now, and we will not do like them. 12,324,000 to install and operate energy-saving LED lights island-wide. But you know what we were told? We weren't we told that that was a project that was financed by the developer? That's what we were told. We were told that that was financed by the developer. And we continue, the investor, the Ministry of Economic, it continued. But we have now a direct award for $12,324. For the same development, that one is a lot more serious than I thought, Mr. Speaker. Because there's a direct award for $12 million to install and operate energy saving lights. Again, the same ministry, Department of Economic Development. $12 million. But we were told in this honorable house by the gentleman who was sitting there, he was boasting how he got a firm to put the lights and they would pay back. We won't spend a cent. The direct award, Mr. Speaker. $12,324,000 US dollars, Mr. Speaker, US, and we were told that that project cost $9 million. Mr. Speaker, that one, Mr. Speaker, will have to be further looked into, Mr. Speaker. I'm not in the business of threats. Never made a threat in my life, but that one is a little more serious, Mr. Speaker. That's a little more serious, Mr. Speaker. So, I'll make down the document of the house. Think I should?
Not yet.
Mr. Speaker, look. A while ago, Mr. Speaker, we were talking about police headquarters, right? And we paid $1 million. So another one, Mr. Speaker, $70,000 for the supervision and site preparation works of the police headquarters and court facility. How what? I must ask you. I wasn't government, huh? How I can do that? But listen, I am making that up, your chief. I don't know. I wasn't in 2020. I don't know. I don't know. So they were just written. So that's a Bobby show. You just write them things and put it away. That's how you run a government. And that's your accountability. So you're going to write things that you're going to pay. Just write it and give it away. Come on. You know better than that. You're a bank, come on. You lend me money already. What's in 10%?
Members, if you're going to have that discussion, that's better in the lounge.
Now, Mr. Speaker, listen, the next day, December 24th, 2020, $70,000 for site preparation works of the police and court facility. And listen to another one that supersedes the one on 24th of December. $850,000 for site preparation works of the police headquarters and court facility. Who? Mr. That one, Mr. Speaker, is calling to heaven for vengeance. But we're going to pay. We're going to pay that one, Mr. Speaker. As soon as we get the money, we'll pay that one, Mr. Speaker. $800,000 for the provision of energy-saving LED lights, photo cells, and arms. $800,000, Mr. Speaker. That's a certain question, comrade. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Here you have $12 million, right? And now you have another $800,000 for the same lights. And whereas you had a contract signed with the Caribbean Development Bank from 2016, May 2016, the whole of Cashews would have had LED lights, Mr. Speaker. The whole of the country, thank you. And you cancel it. Mr. Speaker, but that one for $12 million, that one is one that is very, very shady, Mr. Speaker. I can even hand it to the Attorney General now. Then, Mr. Speaker, we're into the Fortuna picks. Mr. Speaker, there is more, you know. There's just a tip of the way. The only reason why I brought these for the... I brought... Now, a while ago, we had $3 million for Victoria Hospital. We had $3 million. Now, listen to what we have there. Listen to what we have there now. $2,544,870 to undertake additional infrastructural works for the establishment of a dedicated respiratory facility at Victoria Hospital. So that means the $6 million are spent at Victoria Hospital. Mr. Speaker, I'm bringing let me tell you, and there are some fancy names, Mr. Speaker. Forestier, $2.8 million for the construction of the Forestier Human Resource Development Center. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm bringing these things to your attention just to show you, Mr. Speaker, that no matter what laws we have, if your ethos of government is not correct, you'll find ways to go around these laws. And that is why I'm bringing these things to attention, Mr. Speaker. That you can quote from best practice all over the world, Mr. Speaker. But if in your practice of governance, you have to agree? Yeah. If in the practice of governance, Mr. Speaker, you do not do it correctly, no law will save you. So, Mr. Speaker, I gave these examples to show you that laws on books do not help good governance, Mr. Speaker. And if there was good governance, these things would never have existed. And that is only the tip of the iceberg, Mr. Speaker. So you see a reason why we're not allowed to speak, a reason why they want to cloud us out. There's a reason why you have all these rumors of fighting and internal strife just to keep the lid on the truth, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I am not a man of threats. I'm a very simple guy. I'm not the of threatening anybody. I don't believe in victimization. I don't believe in vindictiveness. I don't believe in making people cry. I don't believe in using my position to make other people suffer. That's not what I am about, Mr. Speaker. What I can tell you is the taxpayers of this country will have to get an account for their money which was wasted. Anybody who put to waste the money of the taxpayers of this country, the hard-working men and women, the poor people who cannot get their $250 a month because they don't have money, the children of the disabled children who some months have to stay without the $250 because we don't have any money to give them, Mr. Speaker. That, Mr. Speaker, that's what hurts my heart. And when I see that waste and squander mania happening, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the few, I think it's wrong. My conscience does not allow me to support that kind of behavior, Mr. Speaker. And we will try our best to eradicate it, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.